with Pat Cheung of PodInbox. And of course, everyone knows I love tools and apps and softwares. So I was stalking Pat on LinkedIn and said, checked out one of his articles that was about audience engagement strategies for podcasters. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have to invite him on. So thanks for joining me, Pat. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me, Lindsay.
Yeah. And so it's hard with podcasts, right? Because you think it's the audience is so like remote. They listen on iTunes and stuff, and like who the heck are they? And how do you get a hold of them? And how do you like interact with them? And that can be a real big part that podcasters struggle with. So that's what piqued my interest in your article and that topic. So can you kind of speak a little bit about like what audience engagement even means?
Sure. I think maybe just to start off with a little background too.
Perfect.
When we first started PodInbox, we're like, wow, I've been a long time listener to podcasts, pretty much since it began, and we see different podcasters doing different things. We see like prolific ones, like we think prolific ones, they engage their audience quite a bit. They
Yeah.
don't just engage them on social; they actually find a way to bring them into the show.
Mm,
So we think that's really interesting, and we kind of examined and studied why do they do that. And our theory is we think they do that to help grow the show, right? So and then we looked at and then I listened to all these little tiny little podcasts too, the very niche ones in the stuff I'm interested in. We're like, oh, not everyone does that. So
no.
we're wondering, we first started by asking the question, why aren't they doing it? Why are the prolific ones doing it? Why aren't they doing it? Is it because they don't have the tools to do it? Or maybe there's some lack of education of why that's important.
Right.
So that's how we started. And as we kind of went down that rabbit hole of trying to answer some of these questions, we thought, okay, maybe there aren't that many great tools out there, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of the social tools. Like if I were to ask you now, Lindsay, like how do you engage with your audience? Do you ever bring them onto the show, or is it mainly through Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn?
Yeah. And that is a valid question because you kind of get stuck in a rut too of how you
Mhm.
produce your podcast and promote and what have you. And you see what others are doing. And I've never really had it in my head to like have audience, like, how do you bring them closer? And yeah, I get emails like, you get reviews and get comments on social and maybe even some DMs and comments and people responding to emails and stuff like that. But to me, I'm kind of like, okay, like what else can you do?
Yeah. So that's good that like I'm kind of like half glad that you're a little confused but it's also then becomes the onus of us to kind of help teach that a little bit, right? So and it's funny you said reviews because I don't know if you know Evo Terra. He has a pretty good podcast too. He's been a prolific podcast for a long time.
Yeah.
He kept on equating our thing with reviews, and
Mm.
because that's traditionally one of the few places we do engage with our fans,
You
right?
get
Otherwise, we're
feedback.
just, yeah, you get feedback, right? So I see why he kept on thinking about reviews, but we're a little bit of a different paradigm. We wanted to create a platform where you could just directly, kind of touch some of your what we call your super fans, the people who will engage, and not all your audience is going to engage. Like from what we studied, it's probably about like 1 to 3%. Unless you
Mm.
have great content, that maybe you get up to 9%. But people who actually actively engage are not going to be your full audience, but you want to at least have some mechanism where you activate them. And I could go through, maybe you refer to this article.
Hmm.
I don't know if we're referring to the same article, but I call it the pirate metrics to growth.
Oh, okay.
And we call it that because the acronym is ARRRR. And if you could imagine, right, exactly.
That's
It's
awesome.
R, right? And I kind of stole that from the startup world because we have a similar acronym for tech startups. But I was like, oh, this is pretty useful for podcasters too. And the A stands for activate,
Yeah.
right? Because being a long time podcast consumer, most podcasts I listen to, if they don't tell me to do anything, I'm just a happy camper just kind of listening
Yeah.
passively, right? And those people are good, of course. It gets your numbers up, but those people aren't going to help you grow, right?
Mm,
And our theory is, half the podcasters we ask this question to maybe know the answer. It's like, what's still the number one way to grow your show?
get more listeners and attract more
Yeah,
listeners.
yeah, but how do you do that, right? So,
Yeah.
like, according to, companies like Edison Research, they say still the number one way is word of mouth,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? It's still, and even if you look at your own behavior, it's like, when's the last time you maybe added a show? Well, maybe arguably you just search through a directory, but we're probably already all on all the directories, right? We're already
Hmm.
on iTunes, we're already on Spotify. There's not much more you can do to kind of grease that wheel, right?
Yeah.
But we think there is something you could do to grease the wheel of word of mouth. Like, unfortunately, there's no word of mouth button that you could push on your computer, but there must be something you could do, right? So we think activate that, 3 to 9% of your audience to be active first. And if you do the other parts of the R, which is like recognize, you reply to them, and then you reward them, and then finally you request, make a request, like tell them to, or ask them to tell a friend, or maybe you don't ask them. Maybe the reward is good enough that you get their excitement level so bubbled up that they'll naturally just tell their friends.
Mm.
And one of the rewards we teach a lot is like, if you're using our, I guess just another context is, so PodInbox, we let podcasters easily receive audio messages from fans. That's one of
That's
our core
cool.
features. So, and of that core feature, you could download that audio clip and add it to your show, right? So,
Oh, that's a good idea.
uh, like some kind of Q&A tends to do really well because if you think about it, your listeners are listening to you every week if it's a weekly show or if it's a daily show. They really value not only your show, but they would love to maybe be on it, like make a cameo or on it or something.
That
So
would be cool.
yeah. So what better way for them to brag about your show than by putting them on it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
People get really excited. That's one way of greasing that word of mouth, right? Otherwise, like, how do you know, like just knowing that word of mouth is one of the biggest ways to grow, it doesn't help us unless we know how to grease that wheel, right?
How to leverage it and how to use
Yeah,
it.
how to leverage it exactly. So, yeah, yeah, we teach, and I'm happy to go down that
Yeah,
rabbit
keep
hole.
at her. It's good stuff.
Yeah, so when we say activate, like if we feel like sometimes we're always combating against social. So social is great, but when's the last time we all learn the same things, right? Interact with people on social, and maybe hopefully one day they'll subscribe to your podcast,
Hmm.
right? But when's the last time like you interacted with like a podcaster you liked, they maybe liked your comment and you were so excited that like you told a friend about it? You know,
Yeah.
and from what we've seen, it's like that's maybe not enough reward. Like unless like maybe like I'm a big fan of The Rock. A lot of people follow him on social, right? We're probably one of the
I do
biggest social
too.
guys, right? Yeah, he's awesome, super inspiring. Maybe if he liked my comment on his post, I would tell a friend, it's like, hey, The Rock just, if you're maybe like this huge
Yeah.
personality,
Icon.
and then you get some fan engagement from a celebrity, maybe you'd be pretty excited about it. But we think for the long tail of podcasters, social is good. It's definitely a good habit, but maybe not good enough. But what we teach in Activate is direct engagement is pretty key, right?
Hmm.
If you're directly engaging, so on PodInbox, if you can imagine someone leaves you a message, you could leave an audio reply to their message.
Oh,
We
okay.
think that's pretty nice because let's say I'm following your podcast, I listened to you like for a couple months. Um, that's if you were to reply to me and I'm, respect what you said, that would mean a lot to me. That would mean more
Yeah.
to me than maybe like a social like or something like that.
It's a
That
two-way
direct,
conversation, right? Like you're establishing a bigger relationship than just a
right.
passive listener.
Right. Then all of a sudden you're kind of like a friend and I want to tell people about your show, like at least other
Mm.
podcasters or whatever your subject's about. So we think that's kind of a really good way to leverage that audience engagement. And and we say that's kind of like a medium level reward, going to the other R. The
Yeah.
reply is like a lead, but the big reward is like if you could include them into your show. If
Right.
they're listening to your show and they heard, their question or their story, yeah, that's the thing that they could share, right? So that's when you
Right.
create that like audiogram. You get them to share that they were on
Hmm.
your show, and then that's how that works. And the other thing, we like to clarify when telling this story is like a lot of people when they're kind of teaching this word of mouth thing, they always kind of do this kind of simplistic analogy. It's like if you have 10 listeners and they tell 10 listeners, then you get 20, and then you do the law of doubling,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're at a million after a month, right? No, that's not how it works, right? Because that assumes all 10 of your passive
Yeah.
listeners
Yeah.
become active listeners. Not, that's just not going to happen.
No, unfortunately.
Maybe about 1 to 3%, maybe one out of that 10 will like, but they won't just tell one friend. If you
That's
really
true.
excite them, they're going to tell them like 10 of their friends that kind of resemble their interests or behavior. So we say get to know that one person really well, because that person is going to unlock 10 or 20 of their friends to listen to your podcast,
Mm.
right? Like one of my favorite podcasts is this podcast called This Week in Startups. It's like quickly climbing the charts because the host of that podcast, Jason Calacanis, he's like a master of just engaging his audience. He does it through
Hmm.
YouTube lives, he does it through in person,
Yeah.
and things like that. And he brings people on his show sometimes. So, um, yeah, we think it really works.
Yeah, absolutely. And like
Strategy.
you said, like to me, it's like engaging that audience is more than just that little back and forth. It's like it's creating that relationship with your
Mm-hmm.
listeners so that, like you said, they tell like their friends or they share it with like, oh, this is an absolute go-to resource because you're also tapping into their audience, not just that one person, but their following or their
Mm-hmm.
community or their tribe.
Yeah. I mean, I'd probably clarify a little too that like maybe it's just giving the and maybe this is sounding disingenuous, but like giving the impression that you're creating a relationship because
Yeah,
podcasters as soon as your audience gets bigger, then community becomes a lot harder, right?
yeah,
And yeah, just to catch up on some of your podcasts, I heard your podcast with Chris.
yeah,
Great tips about community. And yeah, community's hard. It's hard when you don't have a team, right? So you have to
true.
make sure you do things that you can sustain, right? Because if you start a community and you don't have time to kind of keep engaging on like a live basis, then that could be a little bit
It can
difficult,
fall
right?
flat.
So like what we teach a lot is like have direct engagement. That could be good enough, right? Someone gets really excited, they don't expect you to be there for them at their beck and call, right?
No.
But if you do stuff like add like I said, like give them a cameo on your show, that's like you know that could excite them for a long enough time to for them to kind of help spread the word. Yeah, so building a relationship, maybe that sounds good, but that might be a little hard. We kind of like to design it so that just enough of a touch point.
Gotcha.
For example, I'll kind of bring up good examples who we see, like Jordan Harbinger. I don't know if you
Mhm.
know his
Yep.
show, very prolific, but he does. I don't think he's building a relationship with anyone, right? You can't with 11 million listeners. But what you could do is he does 3 episodes a week, and on every Friday episode, it's called Feedback Friday, where he takes like I think 5 to 6 audience questions, and then he answers them. Right?
Nice.
It's not really a relationship, but he's giving that reward, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing the audience members, giving one full episode out of 3 to do that. Ever since the beginning of his podcast, he didn't just do it when he got big. He
Yeah.
did it, when it was small too, and he keeps doing it. So, that could be a lesson of like, stuff like that is important. It's like important hygiene, right?
That's a good way to put it. But yeah, I like it because like even as a listener, like if I had a question and it got answered or it was addressed or whatever, it just makes it validates your question for starters, but it
Hmm.
also makes you feel important. And then you feel like that person is like that they give a crap and that
Mhm.
they're a go-to resource. And that
Mhm.
goes a long way.
Oh yeah, totally. And I think sometimes podcasters forget like their biggest sort of gift or asset they have is their show. So
Hmm.
like you could just as well answer a question on I don't know, reply back on Instagram or Twitter or something like that. But this show is like something that fans really value. They listen to it all the time. Like getting a reply on something like your show versus like Twitter is like a world of difference. Like the excitement level is totally different, right?
That's true. I never really thought about it that
Um,
way.
so yeah, highly recommend it. Any kind of Q&A type thing or a listener story, like even, when I think of your show, it's like people are learning a ton of stuff. Uh, it'd be cool, to kind of hear, has anyone taken action on, any one
Yeah,
of those and had some success story or something?
right.
Like doing that once a month, like 3 success stories, just add a bonus episode or something,
That's true.
it's a whole new dimension to the show, right?
Yeah. And for me, it's like getting that feedback, like it, even if it's like, two people and it's not like in droves, but like even just hearing something like, oh, I'm actually going to use that. That was really helpful. And like hearing how it affected them later on. It's like, yay. It's like
Hmm.
the numbers to me, like, sure, I look at them every now and then, but just hearing those personal like
Yeah.
feedbacks, it's kind of like when you're doing a video, you're speaking to one person,
Yeah.
or if you help one person, it makes you feel
Right.
like, okay, it's worth it.
Yeah, and you bring up like a pattern of another really prolific podcaster that I enjoy. Not everyone enjoys them, but probably the top four podcasts, like Dave Ramsey, right? Actually, this is something that Chris Carmisso talked about too, like live call-in, right? This is why we're,
Yeah.
we're excited. Live call-in is great, great. If you could do live call-in, by all means, do it. But live call-in, you probably need a team. You need someone to
You
filter the
would.
the people. You need someone to kind of vet out the people. You need that live call-in software. So it's not easy, but with something like PodInbox, we kind of think of it as the maybe like the cheap live call-in alternative, right? Where you could still get that other voice.
Yeah.
And it's exactly like what you said. It's like when you are listening to someone's scenario or their success story or whatever, that's what his whole show is based on. If you think about the success of the Dave Ramsey show, sure, he's a personality in and of himself, but people want to hear these crazy stories of people
That's
like
so
either
true.
right, either spending unwisely. That's probably what got him famous. And then of course, then the success stories is like, wow, they went from like
Yeah,
spending like crazy to like now they've saved beyond their dreams and things like that.
that is
He
true.
made the fan the hero of the story, right? And he's just the guide. It's a classic sort of a pattern, and he leverages it like a master. And he
Yeah.
does it through live call-ins. And we think for the long tail of podcasters, they probably can't do live call. Live call-ins is super hard. Like we've studied many shows that does live call-ins, and you do kind of need a little army behind that.
And a big following to make sure you're getting the calls in.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And to make sure they're not going to go
Logistics.
crazy once they're live and all that stuff, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
big unmute
Managing.
button.
Yeah. It
But
opens
if you
up a lot of
have
bottlenecks.
yeah,
That's
if
funny.
you have a way to field some of these beforehand and then kind of include the right ones, and yeah, that could be a good technique.
So how does PodInbox work? Like if someone signed up and went inside, like what are some of the features? And because I know I'm like very visual and I have to like
Hmm.
picture it in my head. So how would you explain it?
Sure. So we explained it a little bit like I don't know if we should keep using this analogy, but early on in our where we started, we use Patreon analogy a lot. So you create your own
Right.
pod inbox page. So you send your users there just like you would send them to Patreon. And the reason why I say we maybe shouldn't use it because we've added monetization too. So I don't want to step on their toes too much.
Fair enough.
So you set up a page for your podcast. You could customize the page to be branded, like have your cover art, have your podcast title, and then there's just a big inbox button that lets people leave a message on their web browser. So super easy. You just press record. You could leave it. You could replay it. You could start over and all that stuff, right? And then you just press submit. And when you press submit, we do ask the users create an account and log in. It's very simple. We don't think it's much of a barrier to entry. It's just asking for their email and
Yeah.
password. And the reason why we do that is we want to give you that contact. So we use it
Ah,
as a lead capture. And that's also important because, when we were doing the whole research for creating this tool, we asked a ton of podcasters we talked to, do you have an email list yet? And I was surprised to find, first, happy to find that most podcasters know they need one. They've heard it
yes.
enough through all their trainings and stuff to say, yeah, we need one. But then we ask them, well, do you have one yet? And then they're like, no, not yet. And the biggest barrier is like you have to create something, usually kind of like what's called like a lead magnet, right?
Yeah.
Some reason for them to enter in their email address.
Right.
And we think this is a pretty decent reason. If you want to leave a message for the show to kind of be on it, then that's a pretty good reason, right? And
Yeah.
we,
And it's easy to do. Yeah.
yeah, it's super easy to do. If you could visualize it, we get them to record the audio first. Once they're happy with it, when they press submit, then we say, hey, log in,
Ah,
right?
smart.
So it's a little, we don't ask for the login up front. We let them get a little taste of it. And then, the other good thing about that is we think, a lot of people think, well, I'm only going to start with a small email list. Well, that's kind of the whole thing we're teaching. You're not going to know 100% of your audience, but you should at least know that 1 to 9%. The people who
Yeah.
are actively engaging, those are the ones that are kind of worth sending your newsletter to or whatever you're going to send, because the other people are probably just quite happy being passive, and they should be allowed to be left alone and exist. But if they're activated, then yeah, they probably want to hear what you're saying, right? So at
Yeah,
least
they
know
they want more tips. They may even want the next step, whatever your business model is. So you need a way to nurture,
who.
engage, and get in contact with for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's how it looks like. And then the other really different thing is, uh, by the way, I'm a product designer and UX designer by trade. I'm also the founder of PodInbox, so definitely biased against, for our product. And the other kind of big difference is all the messages are default public. So when you go to it, like let's say your page, if you had one, then people could, you know, listen to a couple other messages before they
Oh,
leave their own,
interesting.
because we think that's in
I
terms
would
of
want to
user
know what other people
experience.
are asking
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
sure.
especially just even as an example of like what kind of question, how long should it be, and what kind of format or
I know,
whatever.
right?
Yeah, just to get an idea of yeah, what it is you want, right? Or what's popular. So we think public messages is super interesting. No one's really doing that yet.
And
And
everyone
we
loves
think
to be heard.
everyone's let yeah, exactly. And that's the other, maybe I feel like I'm talking a lot. If I'm ever
No,
feel
you're
like I'm
good.
talking too much, let me know. But that's the other kind of point of rewarding that audience, right? If they engage, we let them create like a little social profile, just like all these other kind of social apps where, you could click on their name and learn a little bit more about their
Oh,
profile,
okay.
right? Because we know people want to, they want to support your show, but they also want to tell other people who they are, right?
Yeah.
So if
Be
they do, we give
noticed.
them that opportunity. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
which kind of leads me to, so 2 weeks ago, I guess almost 3 weeks now, we just launched our monetization feature.
Nice.
Because we think for the long tail of podcasters, as much as we all want to be, the top podcasts that are making tons of sponsorship revenue and all that, it's just nice to get a little validation, monetary
Hmm.
validation and support from their fans. So if you can imagine, yeah, just we created a really easy way to submit like a little tip, and we gamify that experience. So we have this thing called the leaderboard that you could see, who's your biggest kind of tippers, and then that's
Oh,
kind of another way to recognize, right? And we don't see any other platform doing that,
yeah.
any other, yeah, podcast monetization platform. So we think that's pretty interesting. And then soon we're about to, release what we call message tips. So if you really want to get noticed by the podcaster, and you leave a message and a tip, then maybe that's your way of saying, uh, maybe I'll pay a little bit more attention to it, right? If you leave a tip, and maybe you'll get, better
Oh, I see
chance
what you mean.
of included in the show.
Right, right.
Yeah. And one good example of this is it's another good show. This is more in the, I guess, a little bit more esoteric, but he's also very popular. It's called Mindscape. And a friend actually just told me about this one. It's like one of these huge physics podcasts.
Oh, okay.
They're kind of becoming all the rage now, like these deep science ones,
Woo.
right? Yeah, me
That's
too.
out of
I'm
my
not a
range.
physics guy, but it's like Lex Friedman got popular because he's like super technical, right? This guy's like maybe one rung down or whatever, but he does these. So once a month, he does these 3 hour long Q&A episodes,
Holy.
where he says, if you are a monetary supporter, then he doesn't guarantee you get on the show,
Right.
but that's his table stakes of putting you on,
Well, it's
right?
like an
Like,
incentive, right?
yeah, it's a requirement. It's like you have to be, part of the
Interesting.
membership or whatever. So that's another thing we think hopefully will get bigger. I think, we kind of think this is kind of like a new era of podcasting, and
Yeah.
as podcasters kind of get a little bit more bold and saying, hey, I put a lot of time into this,
Hmm.
and as the creator economy grows, I think we're going to see more and more podcasters like not be shy about asking for, support, monetary
Yeah.
donations, and things like that. So we want to be another sort of tool in that space.
Well, especially when you have a business model, like it's your marketing strategy is having a podcast and you have lead magnets, memberships, coaching programs.
Hmm.
And really, like the information that you're giving, whether you're interviewing or you're a host by yourself, the info that you're giving has value. It's
Hmm.
not just entertainment purposes.
Hmm.
Hopefully we're entertaining as well, but it's valuable information. So like a tip here and there for like
Yeah.
how valuable was that information for you today? How much are you going to
Hmm.
implement, of it? Then show your support and show that it has value for you.
Yeah, for sure.
That makes
I
total
mean,
sense.
we also think it's good for the fan too. I think a lot of times everyone thinks about their own benefit.
Mm,
So, I mean, let's say you're a show that where you think, you're only gonna maybe get like $100 or $200 a month, right? M- then you'd have to ask yourself, is it still worth it? Um, and we think it is. Another $200 is like
I'd be happy with
my
that.
car payment, right? Right?
I
It'd be
know.
great, but
It's a couple of cases of beer.
yeah, exactly. Even for bigger shows, though, it's like if you think about it from the fans' perspective, sometimes they want to just support, right? And they want
Yeah.
to be recognized for that. Giving them a place to do that is useful for them too. I would argue, right?
Hmm.
It's like if you could give them another place where they could be recognized for supporting you or
Yeah.
being your biggest super fan. Like if right now your fans have no place to be your biggest super fan, we think it's a little bit of a missed opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Like being recognized for being, a super fan or one of the top ones, we think it's just as important for that fan to belong to this thing. Um,
Absolutely. Because really, when you think about it and you see even a Facebook post,
mhm,
and let's say it's like, Tony Robbins, Frank Kurt, whoever, like there are diehard fans and they will comment on like every
mhm,
post and they're always like commenting and what have you. So this is just another avenue for them to communicate with someone that they respect and, model after or, just love their stuff. So it's just another way of engaging in that way besides commenting on a social post.
mhm. Yeah, and I love how you said either way because sometimes we get some of our users after we launch are like, should I still use this because I'm already using like Patreon or something like that. We're like, yeah, use them all. Like they all have some benefits.
Absolutely.
Why not experiment and try what
I
works for you?
know.
But it's not a
That's like saying,
zero
oh, should
sum
I only
game.
go on iTunes? No.
Right, exactly. Yeah, or like, should I just be on Instagram? There could be a case to be made of like, yeah, focus on one a little
Hmm.
bit, but it doesn't hurt to be on all the other ones because they all have their little good
Absolutely.
features and what they're good for.
I
So,
know. I love that thought of hearing like some feedback or questions and actually pulling that into an episode. And even as a listener, like listening to other people's episodes and hearing like a question from the audience or a story, or to me, it like brings that extra element of interest to the episode. I think it's great for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we think it's a great practice. We see, huge it's funny, like I'm trying to think like, do more big podcasters or small podcasters? I mean, I think it runs the gamut, but we do see that podcasters that have been doing it for a while, they do see they eventually see the value in it.
Yeah.
They think, and there's never a podcaster who's too big for it. Like even the examples that I've said, it's like they've been podcasting for, I don't know, since it began, 15 years or whatever. And every time I think, wow, maybe they're just too busy at this point, or it's good enough. Their audience is big enough. It's not. We see them keep doing
No,
it,
that's
right?
like saying a
They're
movie
still
star
doing it.
like Angelina Jolie, like she doesn't care about her fans anymore because she's already
Right.
rich. It's like it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that analogy. Right. Yeah, it always pays to care about them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, as podcasters, like you are in this one track, so you don't think of those out of the box ideas, like capturing that audio and putting it in your episode and communicating back to them, with a voice answer or tip or whatever that is. And also on top of that, to have another opportunity of monetizing your podcast. I think it's a really great resource. So I'm so glad you made it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hopefully people enjoy it because obviously we want to be a business, but we want to serve. Our
Yeah.
mission is to serve podcasters. How do we think deeply about how do we help them grow their show? Because we
Yeah.
think ultimately that's probably one of the biggest. Like if I were to break up like podcasting into several phases, like phase one was just like, oh, cool, we could do this thing with RSS now, right? And then phase two, it's like maybe Serial brought that on. It's like it kind of showed the average podcaster that they could do it too, right?
Hmm.
And I think in phase two, like if you call it podcasting 2.0 or something like that, it's like more around what are the nuts and bolts of putting this together? What kind of mic do I buy? Do I need a host and all that kind of stuff? And a ton of vendors can't kind of came into this space. I think phase three is really gonna, I think we're gonna see more of this. It's like we're gonna see companies that think about the next level, which is
Yeah.
like, how do I grow? How do I make money off this thing, right?
And stand out, right?
Yeah. How do I stand out?
Yeah.
How do I take it? It's not going to be about the nuts. Like, I think that's a solved problem for the most
Agreed.
part, maybe a little bit. Like, people are still going to have to learn the technicalities. And yeah, I think, we need important resources for that as well.
Hmm.
But, teaching about what's the next step, there's going to be like hundreds of thousands of, podcasters that need to learn that stuff. And
Yeah.
hopefully there's just more of these voices, giving them good ideas.
Yeah.
Just like your podcast, I think your
Oh, thank
podcast is
you.
great. I could tell you have a focus on growth, not necessarily nuts and bolts, but like of like how to put it together,
Hmm.
but like, yeah, the growing stage is going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, there are different stages, that is for sure. So how can people sign up for Pod Inbox and start engaging with their audience?
Great question. So our website is called podinbox.com. So you
Pretty
could go
easy.
there. Yeah, right now it's a paid, we only have paid plans. We think it's
Yeah.
pretty cheap. We do have one big competitor out there. Happy to say their name, but I keep on not wanting to
Nah.
because I actually like them. I hope they
It's all
get
you,
bigger,
baby.
succeed. But sometimes I feel like I'm talking bad about them if I bring them up or whatever. But I think we're a little bit cheaper than them. So we think about price a lot
Yeah.
because not all podcasters could afford all the
Bells and
fancy
whistles.
tools. So th- sorry, we're $9 a month for one
That's
podcast. If you have
super
one
cheap.
podcast, it's $9 a month, and if you
Yeah.
have three, you upgrade to the business one for $19. But the exciting thing is, we've really been seeing if it works for people. And one thing we learned is like people need to use it for a time before they buy. So we're going to start a free plan in about 2 or 3
Nice.
weeks. So maybe by the time this launches, there's already going to be a free plan. So you can sign up for a free plan, and
Nice.
we'll say it includes most of the It's missing a couple things like
Yeah,
the
for sure.
contact
That makes
lead
sense.
capture and but for the most part, it has everything you need to capture audience
Get a little taste of
clips.
it.
Yeah, yeah, get the public clips up there and even monetize. We're throwing in that feature for
Wow.
so for that for the freemium, we're gonna charge a little bit of a transaction fee, but
Okay.
the way we're different is if you paid for the $9 plan, we'll never charge a transaction fee, which is kind of nice
Gotcha.
because like Patreon charges,
You can get
some
dinged.
transaction fee. Yeah, exactly.
I know.
So yeah, by the
Awesome.
time this releases, yeah, I think people will be able to just kind of sign up, give it a try,
Perfect.
and we do think that's important because it's like it's almost like starting a new Instagram account, right? It's not going to be lively on day one. You're going to have to tell
It's
people
everything
to,
takes time, right?
yeah,
And you
it
got to
takes time.
test it out and stuff. So, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Got to have
So,
realistic expectations.
yeah, highly recommend the free
I
plan
know.
first. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking about engagement and giving us ideas to kind of take our podcast to the next level and grow our audience. You've inspired me to try to get more in touch with my audience. And I'm going to sign up and I'll even do a little video in the future and show
Cool.
people kind of like what it looks like and how I use it. Yeah, I love demonstrating things. So thanks so much for your tips. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate it.